Good evening, my friend. Welcome back. This is day 4 of my rather unusual challenge. If you've been here before, you already know how this works. And if tonight is your first time, then let me explain, slowly. Every night, I sit here, in the quiet, and I tell a story. A calm story, a gentle story. Something soft enough to help you slow down, clear your thoughts, and eventually, fall asleep. And I will keep doing this, every single night, until I finally manage to get a girlfriend. Yes, that is still the plan. Now, before we begin tonight's story, I should give you a small update. Today was quiet. I went to the university like usual, sat through long lectures, pretended to understand things I probably didn't fully understand. And yeah, I saw her again. The same girl. She walked into the room, calm as always, like she wasn't affected by anything around her. For a moment, I thought about it again. Saying something, just a simple hello. But once again, my brain decided to create about 100 different ways that could go wrong. So, I didn't. Not today. But that's fine. This isn't about rushing. It's about small steps. And maybe tomorrow, I'll try. We'll see. But for now, the day is over. The world is quieter. And here, in this small moment of peace, we return to our story. So take a slow breath, and let everything else fade away. Because tonight, we travel to the cold north of Westeros, a land of snow, silence, and ancient stone. And somewhere, inside the great walls of Winterfell, beneath heavy snowflake the north, the harsh land, far to the north of Westeros, beyond the warm fields and golden cities of the south, lies a land unlike any other. A land where winter is not a season, but a constant presence. The north. A vast and silent region, stretching across forests, mountains, and endless plains of snow. Here, the air is always cold. Not just a gentle chill, but a deep, biting cold that seeps into the bones. The kind of cold that slows your breath, that makes every movement feel heavier, that reminds you, quietly, that survival is never guaranteed. Snow falls often in the north. Sometimes softly, drifting through the air like feathers. Other times violently, carried by winds that howl across the land like distant echoes. And when the snow falls long enough, the world becomes quiet. Strangely quiet. The kind of silence that feels almost alive. No busy streets. No crowded markets. No distant music or laughter. Just the wind, the faint crunch of footsteps in the snow, and the occasional call of a lone animal somewhere far away. In the north, silence is not emptiness. It is part of life. A constant companion. And over time, the people who live here begin to resemble the land itself. Calm, reserved, watchful. Unlike the south, where life is filled with color, warmth, and luxury, the north offers no such comfort. In the southern kingdoms, great houses live in castles filled with gold, silk, and celebration. Feasts are common. Music fills the halls. And power is often displayed through wealth and appearance. But in the north, things are different. Very different. Here, survival matters more than status. Warmth matters more than beauty. Strength matters more than pride. The people of the north do not live easy lives. They wake early, often before the sun has fully risen. They work long hours, in conditions that would break weaker men. They prepare constantly, for winters that can last not months, but years. Because in the north, winter is not something you wait for. It is something you prepare for, every single day. Food must be stored. Wood must be gathered. Clothing must be thick and durable. A single mistake, a single moment of carelessness, can mean the difference between life and death. And because of this, the people of the north become different. They do not waste words. They do not show emotion easily. Not because they are cold-hearted, but because life has taught them to be careful, measured, strong. In the south, a man might be judged by his charm, his appearance, or his ability to navigate politics. But in the north, a man is judged by something much simpler. Can he endure? Can he protect his family? Can he survive when everything becomes difficult? That is what matters here. That is what defines a person. And over generations, this way of life has shaped an entire culture. A culture built not on excess, but on resilience. Not on appearance, but on truth. The North remembers, not just events, or history, but hardship, struggle, sacrifice. Every storm survived, every winter endured, becomes part of who they are. And perhaps that is why the North feels so different from the rest of Westeros. Because while other regions rise and fall with politics, alliances, and ambition, the North remains steady, unmoving. Like the snow-covered mountains that stand watch over the land, time moves differently here. Slower, calmer, more deliberate. And in that quiet, in that endless stretch of white and gray, there is something strangely peaceful. Not easy, not comfortable, but peaceful. Because when the world is reduced to its simplest form, cold air, soft snow, distant wind, there is less to distract the mind, less noise, less chaos, only what truly matters remains: warmth, shelter, family, and survival. This is the North, a land that does not forgive weakness, but rewards strength, a place where comfort is rare, but meaning is clear, and at the heart of this harsh, silent world, stands a family that has lived here for thousands of years, a family shaped by the cold, by the silence, by the endless winters, a family that does not seek power through gold, but through honor, the House of Stark. And within their ancient home, surrounded by stone walls and falling snow, a quiet night begins to settle. The fires burn low, the wind softens, and somewhere inside Winterfell, resting peacefully beneath warm blankets, a young girl drifts into sleep, unaware, for now, of the long story that came before her, and the one that is yet to come. Origins of House Stark. Long before the castles of the south were ever built, before kings fought for crowns of gold and iron, before even the name Westeros carried meaning across the world, the north was already there. Ancient, silent, unchanged, and in those distant, almost forgotten ages, when the world was still young, a name began to echo through the cold lands. A name carried in whispers, in stories told beside firelight, in legends passed from one generation to the next. Bran the Builder. No one knows exactly when he lived. Some say thousands of years ago, others believe even longer. Time, in the north, has a way of blurring such things, but the stories remain, and the stories all agree on one thing: Bran was no ordinary man. He was a builder, but not just of stone and wood. He was a creator of foundations, of things meant to last, long after his own life had ended. According to the oldest tales, Bran the Builder was the one who raised Winterfell. Not the Winterfell that stands today, refined and repaired over centuries, but the first version, a fortress built to endure the cold, a place of warmth, in a land that offered very little of it. It is said that the castle was built over natural hot springs, deep beneath the ground, waters that carried heat from the heart of the earth itself. Because of this, even in the coldest winters, Winterfell remained warm, not just physically, but symbolically. A place where life could continue, even when the world outside seemed frozen and unforgiving. But Winterfell was not the only thing Bran the Builder created. Far to the north, beyond forests and mountains, beyond lands where few dared to travel, there stood something far greater: the Wall. A structure so vast, so immense, that even today it feels almost impossible. A barrier of ice, stretching across the entire northern border of the continent. Tall as a mountain, cold as the deepest winter, endless. The stories say that Bran helped build it, after a time known only as the Long Night, a period of darkness, when the sun disappeared, and the world was consumed by cold and fear. Creatures moved in the darkness, things that did not belong to the natural world, and to protect the realms of men, the wall was raised. Stone, ice, and something more. Something ancient. Something not fully understood. Some say magic was used in its creation, old powers, tied to the land itself. Whether that is true or not, no one can say for certain, but the wall still stands, and it has stood for thousands of years, a silent guardian, watching over the north. After the age of legends, came the age of kings. Not southern kings, with golden crowns and elaborate courts, but northern kings, the kings in the north, descendants of Bran the Builder, the first rulers of House Stark. They did not rule through excess or display, they ruled through presence, through strength, through endurance. Their kingdom was vast, larger than all the others, but also harsher. To be a king in the north was not a position of comfort, it was a responsibility, a burden, to protect the people, to survive the winters, to maintain order in a land that offered no mercy. The early Stark kings wore simple crowns, often made of bronze or iron, nothing extravagant, nothing unnecessary, because in the north, symbols mattered less than actions. Their rule lasted for thousands of years. Generations passed. Kings were born, ruled, and eventually faded into history, but the line continued, unbroken, steady, like the land itself. While southern kingdoms rose and fell, while dynasties collapsed and wars reshaped entire regions, the Starks remained. They defended their borders. They maintained their traditions. They endured. There were wars, of course. The north was not free from conflict. Other kings challenged them. Invaders attempted to take their lands. But time and time again, the Starks held their ground, because they understood something others often forgot. Victory was not always about power. Sometimes, it was about patience, about waiting, about surviving longer than your enemy. And in the north, survival was everything. As the centuries passed, the idea of the king in the north became more than just a title. It became identity, a symbol of independence, of resilience, of a people who did not bend easily, and did not forget who they were. Even when the rest of Westeros began to change, even when new kingdoms formed, new alliances emerged, the north remained its own world, guided by its own rules, its own rhythm, its own silence, and always, at the center of it all, stood Winterfell, the ancient castle built by a legend, home to generations of Starks, a place where fire still burned against the cold, a place where stories were told, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, passed down through time, from parent to child, from elder to youth. Stories of Bran the Builder, stories of kings, stories of long winters and longer endurance. And on nights like this, when the wind moves softly beyond the walls, and the cold remains outside, those stories feel closer, more real, more alive, because the past, in the north, never truly disappears. It lingers, in the stones, in the silence, in the snow that falls, again and again, and inside the ancient halls of Winterfell. As the night deepens, and the world grows still, the legacy of House Stark continues, quietly, endlessly, like the north itself. Winterfell, the heart of the north, at the center of the vast, frozen north, surrounded by forests, hills, and endless fields of snow, there stands an ancient castle, not the tallest, not the richest, not the most extravagant in all of Westeros, but perhaps, the most enduring. Winterfell. From a distance, it does not shine like the castles of the south. There are no golden towers, no marble walls reflecting the sun. Instead, its stones are dark, weathered by time, shaped by centuries of wind, snow, and quiet resilience. Its walls are thick, solid, built not to impress, but to last. And they have. For thousands of years, Winterfell has stood in the same place, watching seasons pass, watching generations rise and fall, always there, always steady. But what makes Winterfell truly unique is not just what can be seen from the outside, it is what lies beneath. Deep under the castle, flow natural hot springs, warm waters rising from the earth itself. Because of these hidden currents, heat travels through the stone walls, through the floors, through the very foundation of the castle. And even in the coldest winters, when snow covers the land in silence, Winterfell remains warm, not hot, not overwhelming, just comfortably warm, a quiet contrast to the frozen world beyond its gates. Inside the castle, life moves at a different pace, slower, calmer, more grounded. The halls are long and dimly lit, with torches flickering softly against the stone walls. Their light dances gently, creating shadows that shift and stretch, as if the castle itself is breathing. Footsteps echo lightly through the corridors, never rushed, never chaotic. People here do not hurry without reason, they move with purpose, with awareness. Because Winterfell is not a place of noise, it is a place of presence. In the great hall, long wooden tables stand ready, where meals are shared in quiet conversation. Not loud celebrations like in the south, but steady, meaningful moments. Food is simple, warm, nourishing. Bread, meat, stews that simmer slowly over fire. Meals in Winterfell are not about excess, they are about survival, and about being together. And that, perhaps, is what defines Winterfell most. Not the walls, not the towers, but the feeling, a sense of home, a place where people belong. In the early hours of the morning, before the sun fully rises, the castle begins to stir. Servants move quietly through the halls. Fires are tended, doors open with soft creaks. Outside, the air is sharp with cold, but inside, there is warmth, a steady, quiet warmth. Training yards begin to fill with movement. The sound of wooden swords meeting, of boots pressing against snow, of breath visible in the air. In the north, even those born into noble families understand the importance of strength, because Winterfell does not separate its people from reality, it prepares them for it. Children grow up learning not just how to read or speak, but how to endure, how to remain steady when things become difficult, how to face the cold, without fear. And as the day passes, the rhythm continues. Simple tasks, quiet duties, no unnecessary noise, no distractions, only what needs to be done. And when evening comes, the castle softens even more. The fires burn brighter, the air grows still, and a deeper silence settles in. Not empty, but peaceful. In the private chambers, Families gather. Stories are told in low voices. Laughter appears, not loud, but genuine. Moments that are not meant for display, but for memory. Because in a place like Winterfell, where the world outside can be harsh and unforgiving, these small moments matter. They last. They stay. And as night fully arrives, and the sky above the north darkens into deep shades of blue and black, the castle begins to rest. Torches dim, doors close, footsteps fade into silence. Only the soft crackling of fire remains, echoing gently through stone halls. And in one quiet room, far from the cold winds outside, a young girl lies beneath heavy blankets. Safe, warm, her breathing slow and steady, as sleep slowly takes her. Sansa Stark, her red hair resting softly against the pillow, her expression calm, untouched by worry. For now, she dreams only of gentle things, of songs, of stories, of a world that still feels simple. And around her, Winterfell watches in silence. The ancient castle, holding its warmth, holding its people, just as it has done for countless nights before. A place not of gold, not of power, but of something far rarer. A place that feels like home. And as the firelight flickers, and the cold remains outside where it belongs, the night in Winterfell continues, quietly, peacefully, unchanged. The Starks and the South. Beyond the quiet strength of the North, past the forests and the cold rivers, the world begins to change. The air grows warmer, the colors become richer, and life becomes louder. This is the South, a place of sunlight, banners, and endless movement. Where the North values silence, the South embraces sound. Where the North moves with patience, the South moves with ambition. And nowhere is this difference more clear than in the way its great houses live and rule. In the North, the Starks lead with something simple: honor. Not as an idea, but as a way of life. A promise that words matter, that actions carry weight, that a man should stand by what he says, even when it is difficult. But in the South, things are rarely that simple. Power there is not always held by the strongest, or the most honest. It is shaped by alliances, by careful words, by decisions made in quiet rooms. Politics, a different kind of strength, a different kind of survival. And among the many great houses of the South, two stand out, not just for their power, but for their influence over the entire realm. House Lannister and House Baratheon. The Lannisters, rulers of the West. Their lands are rich with gold. Their castles are grand, carved into mountains that overlook the sea. Where Winterfell is built for endurance, Casterly Rock is built for display and dominance. Gold flows through the Lannisters' world, and with gold comes power. But not the quiet power of the North. Theirs is influence, control, the ability to shape events without ever stepping onto a battlefield. They understand the game of the South, and they play it well. Words, promises, alliances, these are their tools. And sometimes, those tools can be more powerful than swords. Then there are the Baratheons, a house known for strength, for presence, for force. Their lands lie in the Stormlands, where winds crash against stone castles, and the sea never truly rests. The Baratheons are not as quiet as the Starks, nor as calculated as the Lannisters. They are direct, powerful, driven by will. And for a time, they held the highest seat in all of Westeros, the Iron Throne, a position that required more than strength, more than honor. It required balance. And that is where the difference between North and South becomes most clear. Because ruling the North and ruling the Seven Kingdoms are not the same. In the North, loyalty is often simple, earned through respect, maintained through trust. But in the South, loyalty shifts. It changes, depending on opportunity, on advantage, on who stands to gain the most. A friend today can become an enemy tomorrow. And so, when the Starks look south, they see a world that feels unfamiliar. Not wrong, but different. A place where words must be chosen carefully, where silence can mean many things, where truth is not always spoken openly. And when the South looks north, they often see something else. A house that is strong, but perhaps too rigid, too honest, too unwilling to bend. Because in a world built on strategy, honor can sometimes feel like a weakness. But the Starks do not change. They remain what they have always been. Steady, grounded, true to their values. Not because it is easy, but because it is who they are. And while the South continues to shift and evolve, with its politics, its alliances, its quiet ambitions, the North remains cold, silent, certain, Two worlds, connected by the same land, yet separated by something far deeper than distance. A difference in belief, in rhythm, in the very way life is understood. And somewhere between these two worlds, paths will eventually cross. Not in peace, but in consequence. But for now, the north is still quiet. Winterfell still stands, and far from the noise of southern courts, the night continues, just as it always has. Calm, measured, unchanged, as if the storms of the south have not yet arrived. Eddard Stark, honor above all. In a land shaped by cold winds and quiet endurance, where strength is measured not in gold, but in character, there lived a man who embodied everything the North stood for. A man known not for his ambition, nor for his hunger for power, but for something far rarer: honor. His name was Eddard Stark. To many, he was simply called Ned, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North. A leader whose presence was steady, calm, and unwavering. He was not loud. He did not seek attention. He did not fill rooms with speeches or grand displays. Instead, he led through example, through quiet actions, through decisions made with care, through a deep understanding of responsibility. In the North, leadership was not about control, it was about duty. And Ned Stark understood that better than most. He believed that a lord's role was not to command from a distance, but to stand among his people, to share their burdens, to face the same cold, to carry the same weight. And nowhere was this belief more visible than in a simple but powerful rule he lived by, a rule that defined him. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. It was not just a saying, it was a philosophy, a reminder that judgment should never be taken lightly, that decisions, especially those that affect life and death, must be faced directly, without distance, without avoidance, because when a man delivers justice himself, he cannot hide from it, he feels its weight, he understands its cost, and that changes everything. In Winterfell, when a sentence was passed, Ned Stark did not send others to carry it out. He went himself, calm, focused, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with acceptance, because to him, justice was not about punishment, it was about balance, responsibility, truth. This way of thinking shaped everything about him. He spoke carefully, he listened more than he talked, he did not rush decisions. And because of this, the people of the North trusted him, not out of fear, but out of respect. They knew he would not lie to them, they knew he would not betray them, they knew that when he made a decision, it came from a place of honesty. And in a world where power often came from manipulation, that made him different, stronger in some ways, but also more vulnerable, because honor, while powerful, is not always easy to carry. It demands sacrifice, it demands restraint. It demands that a man choose the harder path, even when an easier one is available. And Ned Stark chose that path, again and again. In the quiet moments, when no one was watching, he remained the same, unchanged, consistent, a rare thing in any world. As a father, he carried that same presence. Not distant, not cold, but firm, guiding, teaching not through long speeches, but through example, through small lessons, through moments that stayed. He taught his children what it meant to be strong, not just in body, but in character, to stand for something, to remain steady, even when the world around them shifted. And in the halls of Winterfell, his presence was constant, a quiet center, around which everything else moved. He did not need to raise his voice, he did not need to demand attention, because when he spoke, people listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because his words carried weight, meaning, truth. And yet, despite all this strength, there was something deeply human about him, a quiet understanding that the world was not always fair, that doing the right thing did not always lead to the right outcome, but still, he did it, not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was who he was. In a land of harsh winters, endless challenges, and quiet survival, Ned Stark stood as a reflection of the North itself, calm, but strong, silent, but unbreakable. A man shaped by his home, and in turn, shaping those around him. And as night settles once more over Winterfell, and the fires burn softly against the cold, his presence lingers, in the walls, in the silence, in the lessons left behind, a quiet reminder that true strength is not always loud. Sometimes, it is steady, unmoving, and always guided by honor. The Stark children, Within the ancient walls of Winterfell, where silence rests gently against stone, and the warmth of hidden springs protects against the endless cold, a new generation begins to grow. Not kings, not yet legends, but children, each one shaped by the North, yet each one profoundly different, because even in the same home, even under the same sky, no two paths are ever the same. Sansa Stark dreams and reality. Among them, there is one who once looked beyond the North. Sansa Stark, soft-spoken, graceful, and drawn to a different kind of world. While the North teaches strength through endurance, Sansa once dreamed of beauty, of songs, of shining nights, of castles filled with music and light. In her mind, the world was gentle, predictable, a place where stories always ended well, where good was rewarded, and kindness returned. She imagined a life far from the cold silence of Winterfell, a life where warmth came not just from fire, but from people, from celebration, from love. And in those early days, as she rested in her chambers, wrapped in soft blankets, listening to distant winds brushing against the castle walls, those dreams felt real, close, possible. But the world, beyond Winterfell, is not built like a story. It is not shaped by dreams. And slowly, quietly, Sansa begins to understand this. Not all at once, not with sudden force, but gradually, through small moments, through changes she cannot ignore. And with that understanding, something within her shifts. She does not lose who she is. She evolves. Her softness becomes strength. Her silence becomes awareness. And where once she saw the world as something beautiful, she begins to see it as something complex, unpredictable, real. Crossed swords Arya Stark freedom and strength. Where Sansa looks outward, toward dreams and distant places, Arya Stark looks inward, toward movement, toward action, toward freedom. She is not drawn to songs or gowns, nor to the quiet expectations placed upon her. Instead, she moves, restless, curious, alive in a different way. While others sit still, Arya explores corridors, courtyards, hidden paths within the castle. Her world is not one of stillness, but of motion. And in that motion, she finds herself. She learns not through stories, but through experience. Through trying, through failing, through standing back up again. There is a quiet strength in her, one that does not seek approval, one that does not wait for permission. In a place where tradition holds weight, Arya walks her own path. Not out of rebellion, but out of truth. Because she cannot be anything else. And though her journey is different, though her way of understanding the world is not the same as her sister's, it is no less real, no less meaningful. Because strength, in the North, takes many forms. Jon Snow identity and solitude. And then, there is another. One who stands slightly apart, even within the walls of Winterfell. Jon Snow. Raised alongside the Stark children, trained beside them, living under the same roof, yet never quite the same. Not fully one of them, not fully separate. There is a quiet distance around him, not imposed by anger, nor by rejection, but by something deeper. Identity. A question that follows him, in silence. Who is he? Where does he truly belong? In the North, family is everything. Name matters, blood matters. And Jon exists between those lines, neither fully inside, nor fully outside. And so, he learns something early. To stand on his own. To find strength not in certainty, but in resilience. In accepting the unknown, without allowing it to define him. There is solitude in his path, but not loneliness. Because within that solitude, he builds something steady, something quiet, a sense of self, not given by others, but shaped from within. A family, yet different paths. Together, they are part of the same house, raised in the same halls, guided by the same values, protected by the same walls. And yet, each of them sees the world differently. Sansa, through dreams that slowly meet reality. Arya, through movement and freedom. Jon, through silence and self-discovery. 3 paths. 3 ways of understanding life, and all of them, shaped by the North. Because the North does not create identical people, it reveals who they truly are. And within the quiet of Winterfell, as the night deepens once more, they rest, unaware, for now, of how far their paths will take them, unaware of the distance, the challenges, the changes that await. For now, they are simply children, sleeping beneath the same roof, protected from the cold, held within the warmth of home. And as the firelight flickers softly, and the wind moves gently beyond the walls, their stories, like the North itself, continue. slowly, quietly, becoming something more. Crossed swords fall of the Starks, even in a place as steady as the North, where stone walls have stood for thousands of years, and traditions feel unshakable. Change eventually arrives. Not always as a sudden storm, but sometimes as a quiet shift, a movement barely noticed at first. For House Stark, the change begins slowly, almost gently, like the first snow of a long winter, soft, silent, easy to ignore. But beneath that calm surface, something deeper is already in motion. Far from Winterfell, in the distant south, decisions are being made, words spoken in quiet rooms, alliances formed, then reshaped, the kind of movements that are not seen, but are always felt, eventually. And the North, for all its strength, is not untouched by them. The Starks, who have long remained in their own rhythm, find themselves drawn into a different world, a world where honor is not always enough, where truth is not always rewarded. And as those two worlds begin to meet, the foundation that once felt so certain begins to shift, not breaking, not yet, but changing. At first, it is only distance. Familiar faces no longer gathered in the same place, voices that once filled the halls, growing quiet. The great rooms of Winterfell, still standing, still warm, but somehow, feeling larger, more empty, as if something important has quietly stepped away. Separation does not always come with noise. Sometimes, it comes with absence, with the simple realization that things are no longer as they were. Each member of the family, following a different path, not by choice, but by circumstance, pulled by forces beyond their control. And with that separation, comes a new kind of understanding, of the world, of themselves, of what it means to stand alone. For a family so deeply connected, this distance is not easy, but it is real. And in that reality, they begin to change, not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, like the North itself. Loss, too, finds its way in, not as a sudden, overwhelming force, but as something softer, something that lingers, a feeling that something is missing, that a presence once constant is no longer there. In the halls of Winterfell, the fires still burn, the walls still stand, but the silence feels different now, deeper, heavier, in a way that is hard to describe. And yet, life continues, because in the North, it always does. The people endure, they adapt, they move forward, even when the path is unclear. And the Starks, true to everything they have always been, do the same. They do not collapse under the weight of change. They do not abandon who they are. Instead, they carry it with them, wherever they go. In different lands, under different skies, facing different challenges, the essence of the North remains within them. Honor, resilience, quiet strength. Even when separated, they are still connected, not by proximity, but by something deeper, something that cannot be broken by distance, or altered by time. And so, what might appear as a fall, is not truly an ending. It is a transformation, a movement from one state to another, from certainty to uncertainty, from unity to distance, but not to disappearance, because some things do not fade, they endure, even when unseen, even when scattered. And as the night settles once more, over the silent towers of Winterfell, the wind moves gently across the empty courtyards, snow falls, as it always has, soft, endless, unchanged. And though the halls may feel quieter, though the voices may be fewer, the story of the Starks has not ended. It has only moved forward, into something new, something uncertain, but still, quietly strong. Legacy of the North. When everything else begins to fade, when battles are no longer fought, when names are spoken less often, some things remain, not because they demand to be remembered, but because they were never meant to disappear. The North is like that. It does not change easily. It does not forget quickly. It continues, and within it, the legacy of House Stark endures, not as a story of conquest, not as a tale of endless victory, but as something quieter, something deeper, a way of being. The Starks have always stood for honor, not the kind spoken in grand halls, not the kind used to impress, but the kind that exists in silence, in choices made when no one is watching, in decisions that are difficult, but necessary. Honor, in the North, is not a strategy. It is a foundation. It is what guides a person, even when the path ahead is uncertain, even when the outcome is unknown. And that is why it lasts, because it does not depend on success. It depends on truth. Then, there is resilience. The North does not offer comfort freely. It does not promise ease. Winters are long, storms are harsh, and life is often demanding. But still, the people endure. They rise each day. They prepare. They continue. And the Starks reflect that perfectly. They do not avoid hardship. They move through it, quietly, without complaint. Because resilience is not loud. It does not need to prove itself. It simply exists. A steady force, carrying them forward, again and again. And perhaps, the most defining trait of all, is silence. Not emptiness, not absence, but a kind of calm. The silence of falling snow, the silence of a cold night, the silence of a castle resting beneath the stars. In the North, silence is not something to escape. It is something to understand, because within it, there is clarity. No noise, no distraction, only what matters. And the Starks have always belonged to that silence. They do not seek attention. They do not demand recognition. They simply remain steady, present, unmoving, even as time passes, even as the world beyond the North continues to shift. With its politics, its ambition, its constant change, the North stays the same. Snow continues to fall. Winds continue to move across the land. The nights remain long and quiet. And somewhere within that stillness, the legacy continues. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that cannot be erased. Because some things are not meant to fade. They are meant to endure, to become part of the land itself. And so, the Starks remain, not just as a family, but as an idea. Honor, resilience, silence. 3 simple things, yet powerful enough to last for generations. And as the night deepens, and your thoughts begin to slow, that presence is still there. Calm, steady, unchanged. The North continues, and so does its legacy. Quietly, like snow, falling without end. And now, as our story gently comes to an end, let's take a quiet moment to reflect. Tonight, we traveled far to the North. A land of cold winds, silent forests, and endless snow. But more than that, we explored something deeper. We saw what it means to live with honor, not as something spoken, but as something practiced. Through the life of Eddard Stark, we understood that true strength is not loud, it is steady. We saw resilience in a land that demands endurance, where survival is not guaranteed, but earned, day by day. And we felt the quiet power of silence, not emptiness, but peace. A space where the mind can rest, where thoughts slow down, where everything becomes a little simpler. We followed the paths of Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, and Jon Snow, each one different, each one learning, each one growing, in their own way. And through them, we saw that even in the same place, every journey is unique, but all of them carry a piece of the North within. And now, the story rests. The fires in Winterfell burn low, the wind moves softly beyond the walls, snow continues to fall, quietly, endlessly, and somewhere, in a warm room, safe beneath heavy blankets, Sansa sleeps peacefully, unaware of everything we have just seen, resting in calm, wrapped in silence. So now, it's your turn. Let go of the day. Release the thoughts that no longer matter. Allow your mind to slow, your breathing to soften, your body to rest. And for an even deeper, more peaceful experience, in just a moment, you will begin to hear the gentle sound of rain in the background. A soft, steady rhythm, designed to help you relax and drift even further into sleep. Thank you for being here tonight. If you'd like to continue this journey, you can return tomorrow for another story. But for now, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the quiet of the North guide you into rest. Good night, my friend.